It had been an odd day at the end of an even stranger week. When I left for work that morning, there was something in the air, an unease I couldn't quite put my finger on. It had been gnawing at the back of my mind for days, ever since my wife first mentioned the party. If someone had asked me to explain it, I wouldn't have known how. He hadn't even acknowledged it as a real thought, just an underlying tension, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was nothing concrete, just a feeling. But it left me restless and on edge all day. At work, I tried to focus, but my nerves kept creeping in. I didn't want to go to the damn party. If I was being honest, I never liked any of Lisa's office gatherings. A bunch of smug-ass lawyers who all think their shit doesn't stink, I thought bitterly. You can't just skip the office Christmas party, David. That wouldn't be right, Lisa had insisted when I tried to get out of it. Of course, I was going. I always did what Lisa wanted. As I powered down my computer for the weekend, my eyes landed on a framed photo of my two sons from a fishing trip last summer. A genuine smile spread across my face. Lately, my boys were the only bright spot in my life at home. Halfway through my drive back, traffic slowed due to an accident in the right lane. Dusty realized I've been so lost in thought that I barely remembered the drive itself. The delay set me back about 15 minutes, and I already knew what kind of welcome I'd get when I walked through the front door. Sure enough, instead of the greeting I once might have received, a hug, a kiss, Lisa hit me with a snide remark the moment I stepped inside. "It's not like you could be home on time for once," she muttered, barely looking up. "Now go change into your gray pinstripe suit. That one's my favorite." I sighed to myself but didn't argue. I have planned to wear my dark blue suit, the one that made me feel more confident, more in control. The gray one was nice, but I always felt like he faded into the background when I wore it. And the last thing I wanted was to blend into the scenery around these people. James Fielding, the newest partner at one of California's most high-profile criminal law firms, was hosting the party at my massive home. As soon as they stepped inside, I noticed Lisa's demeanor shift. She was talking too fast, her eyes blinking more than usual, classic signs that she was stressed. As they approached the main entertaining area, Lisa suddenly tightened her grip on my arm and pulled me aside, pressing me against the wall as she wrapped her arms around me. "Lisa, what's going on?" I asked, my brow furrowing. "Is something wrong?" "No, I just wanted to say something," she murmured. "Say what?" She took a deep breath. "David, you know I love you. I always have. And no matter what happens tonight, that won't change. Nothing will ever change between us. Just remember that, okay?" I frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" She shook her head. "Look, I know you don't like these people, and maybe tonight will be a lot, but as long as you remember that we're solid, everything will be fine." I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "Lisa, these events have never been fun for me, but I always put up with them, don't I? What's different this time?" "Just promise me you'll remember that we're okay," she insisted. Then, just like that, she pulled away, slipping her hand into me as we stepped into the room. Fielding was holding court near the bar, gesturing animatedly as I spoke to a cluster of well-dressed attorneys. Behind me, a large painting of a naked woman reclining on a bed dominated the space. I peeled off toward the bar, grabbing a glass of white wine for Lisa and a scotch for myself. As I turned, I caught Fielding's gaze for the briefest moment. The man gave me a slow, knowing nod and smirked. Something about it made my skin crawl. I couldn't put my finger on why, but in that moment, I was sure of one thing. I really didn't like James Fielding. Drinks in hand, I made my way back toward Lisa, who was already drifting toward Fielding's group. She positioned herself just right so that I ended up on the outside of the circle, slightly behind her. Fielding greeted her with a polite kiss on the cheek before returning to whatever pompous monologue he was delivering. I stood on the periphery, barely paying attention. Instead, my eyes wandered, once again landing on that nude painting above the bar. I smirked to myself. Of course Fielding has a giant naked woman on his wall. Real subtle, asshole. Shaking my head, I took a sip of my drink and refocused on the room. That nagging feeling from earlier? It was still there. And for the first time all week, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it wasn't just in my head. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed several people sneaking glances in my direction. My stomach tensed. Instinctively, I looked down at my suit, wondering if I have spilled something on myself. Or worse, was my damn fly open? A quick scan of my clothes showed no stains, and a subtle check confirmed my zipper was up. But the stares didn't stop. The longer I stood there, the more uncomfortable I felt. Turning back toward the bar, I let my gaze drift to the painting again. That's when it hit me. The painting was undeniably erotic. A woman with raven black hair lay sprawled across a bed, nude, her eyes hazy, her body relaxed in the unmistakable aftermath of deep, satisfying sex. I knew that look, knew it too well, and, more importantly, I knew that face. Because the woman in the painting was standing right next to me. My mind short-circuited. For a moment, I simply stopped thinking. Hell, I stopped breathing. My mouth hung open as I stared at the painting, frozen in place. I didn't notice Fielding exchange smirks with my wife. Didn't register the way the murmurs in the room slowly died down. How more and more people turned to watch me. Some were amused, others looked at me with pity. It could have been 10 seconds or an eternity before I found my voice again. I leaned in close to Lisa, my voice barely above a whisper. That's you. But in the silence of the room, it might as well have been a scream. Lisa let out a small, breathy laugh. No, David, she said smoothly. That woman has black hair. I have auburn. Silly. She even giggled, like this was all some hilarious joke at my expense. But the laugh did nothing to ease the weight in the room. If anything, it made her denial feel even more false. I wasn't the only one making comparisons. I could see it. People glancing from Lisa to the painting, then back again. A few exchanged knowing looks. Others outright chuckled. Fielding shot Lisa a quick wink. My mouth felt dry as I turned back to the painting, my voice flat, distant, like I was barely there. Black hair, but auburn pubic hair. Lisa's expression faltered. She looked at the painting again. Harder this time. She had seen it before, of course, but in the moment, she had overlooked one detail. The artist had changed the woman's hair to black, but had left that hair untouched. The exact color of her own. Was that intentional? A mistake? Not that it mattered now. Lisa had assumed I would eventually figure it out. She and Fielding had both expected it to dawn on me gradually, after a few drinks had dulled my senses. Neither of them had planned for such an immediate, brutal reveal. Before I could process what was happening, I felt strong hands clamp down on my arms. What the hell? I barely got the words out before I was being pulled from the main room. 2 men, big guys, probably security, steered me into a smaller side room. A moment later, Fielding and Lisa followed. I shook them off, my pulse pounding in my ears. Fielding stepped forward, his smirk turning into something nastier. Listen, you little nerd, he said, voice dripping with condescension. Here's how this is gonna go. Your wife? She belongs to me now. But you still get to keep her, and your little home life, whenever I'm not using her. My breath came shallow. What? You fight this, Fielding continued, and the firm will back Lisa in a divorce. We'll take everything you have. And guess what? I'll still be with her. I turned to my wife, eyes searching hers for some kind of denial, some flicker of regret. Anything. Lisa just looked back at him, calm, almost bored. This has been going on for a while now, she admitted. And you never had a clue. So really, you haven't lost anything? My stomach twisted. We're not changing anything, she continued. You and I will keep going like we always have. And I'll keep seeing James. Or, you can fight me on this, and I'll take half of everything we own in a divorce, and still see James. Your choice. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. Most of my coworkers and friends already know, Lisa added with a small shrug. Honestly, you're just about the only one who doesn't. Well, you and the boys. And your friends. She sighed, as if this was all just a tedious discussion. This isn't about us, David. It's about your ego. Lisa folded her arms, her expression unreadable. I mean, we can keep being husband and wife, with everything that implies, or... I cut her off, my voice raw. Or what? Why the hell would I ever want to sleep with you again? I let out a bitter laugh. You're with him. You've made it pretty damn clear I'm just an afterthought. I'm not about to take sloppy seconds from James Fielding's personal. Fielding chuckled, shaking his head. Feeling better now, David? His smirk widened. You got to call her a name. What's next? Gonna accuse her of having cooties? He turned to Lisa, grinning. Damn, I was so right about him. He really is just a little man. His laughter echoed through the room as I was dragged out, then shoved through the front door. The laughter followed me as I stepped onto the cold pavement. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to keep my emotions in check. I would not let them see me break. As the door shut behind me, I could still hear Fielding crowing. Did you see the look on David's face when he saw that painting? Said her lover. Lisa's voice was quieter, but still clear. You do realize he's smart enough to figure out when it was done, right? At least when it started? Fielding scoffed. Yeah, and? Lisa hesitated. I guess. I'm gonna have to apologize to him. Apologize? For what? Fielding snorted. For the painting, she admitted. I mean, when he practically accused me of cheating last year, I figured I needed to get back at him somehow. This was a good way to do it. Fielding let out a loud, amused laugh. Lisa, you were cheating on him at that point. She didn't answer. A few minutes later, Lisa followed me outside, probably thinking she'd need to calm me down. She had no idea. I barely looked at her as I unlocked the car. I was too busy replaying the last year in my mind, seeing all the moments when things hadn't quite added up. Moments I have questioned her about, only to have her shut me down. Every time, she had gotten indignant, self-righteous, offended that I would dare suspect anything. And every time, like a fool, I have backed off, feeling guilty for doubting my wife of 27 years. As we drove home in silence, my thoughts drifted to the beginning of Lisa's 12-year career at firm. For years, she had been a stay-at-home mom, raising their two boys. Once they were in school, she decided it was time to go back to work. At first, she had been assigned to Old Man Hanson himself, the firm's senior partner. But when Hanson retired 3 years ago, his replacement was none other than James, 35 years old, 6'4", 220 pounds of arrogant, smirking charm. I still remembered the way Lisa had talked about him those first couple of months. She had been nervous around him, unsettled by the way he looked at her. But she had also chattered about him constantly. And then, all at once, she went radio silent. I have always known my wife was beautiful, even at 47, with long, flowing hair and curves that still turned heads. She was stunning. I have never understood how I have gotten so damn lucky to be with her. Not that I was some unattractive loser. At 5'9" and a solid 170, I was in good shape. Quiet, analytical, the kind of man people associated with accountants, which, of course, he was. But he was never the guy who commanded a room. When I found out Lisa's new boss was younger, handsome, interested, I have made a point to keep an eye on things. At first, nothing changed. She worked late no more than she had before. But then, about a year ago, the late nights started adding up. Then came the often business trip. A full week away with Fielding, some legal symposium she had to attend. I haven't liked it, but I have understood. She was his admin. Sometimes, that meant traveling. Still, I had voiced my discomfort. Lisa had lashed out, snapping that I didn't trust her. After 25 years of marriage. And just like that, I have let it go. Now, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. By the time they pulled into the driveway, I wasn't in spirit anymore. I stepped inside, barely acknowledging Lisa, and went straight for the liquor cabinet. A single malt scotch. At least that much was still solid in my life. I poured myself a generous glass, took a long sip, then practically collapsed into my recliner. It wasn't every day your entire life came crashing down in a matter of minutes. The tears came before I could stop them. I broke down completely, my body shaking, sobs racking my chest. For 5 straight minutes, I let myself feel it. Then, finally, the storm passed. I wiped my face roughly, took another drink, and stared blankly at the TV, where It's a Wonderful Life was playing. I let out a hollow, humorless laugh. Yeah, what a wonderful fucking life. I downed another few glasses, letting the alcohol dull my mind. before finally drifting off in my chair. At some point, 2 a.m., to be exact, Lisa woke me, shaking my arm gently. "You should come to bed," she murmured. I blinked up at her, his mind still clouded from the scotch. My lips parted, and I let out a soft, bitter chuckle. "I've got to admit, Lisa, I didn't see that coming. I just don't want the boys to ever see that painting," I said flatly, my voice void of emotion. Lisa's face turned crimson. From the look in her eyes, I could tell. It had never even occurred to her what their sons would think. She had been so wrapped up in her own twisted little game that she hadn't considered them at all. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep myself from doing something I've regret. She will never know just how close she came to ending up in the hospital that night. If it weren't for my late father's voice in the back of my mind, reminding me to be the better man, I might not have stopped myself. I took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing my hands to relax. Lisa noticed the movement, and for the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. Maybe, finally, she was realizing just how far she had pushed me. "Since we're being so open and honest," I said, my voice tight, "answer me two things. Why? And for how long?" Lisa dropped her gaze to the carpet, her face shifting through a series of emotions. Guilt, shame, defensiveness. "We didn't mean for this to happen," she murmured. "It just did. About a year ago, James and I realized we had a lot in common. You and I, we had gotten stale." She hesitated, then added, "James is a take-charge kind of guy, and, well, he kind of took charge of me. I liked it. I liked it a lot." I just stared at her, my stomach churning. "And when you sort of accused me of cheating," she went on, "I got mad. So James and I, we came up with a way for me to get even." I let out a bitter laugh. "But you were already cheating. That's not getting even. That's just rubbing my face in it." Lisa opened her mouth, like she was about to argue, but then just lowered her head again in silence. "So, what you're really telling me," I said coldly, "is that you picked something new and exciting over same old, same old. Everything we built over the years, our marriage, our life together, it didn't mean a damn thing to you." "I still love you, David," Lisa said quickly. "I'm just not in love with you anymore. James and I connect on so many levels. It's new, it's exciting." My eyes narrowed. "Of course it is, you bimbo. You're a fresh piece of meat to him, and he's a new toy to you. You haven't raised kids with him, haven't built a life with him, haven't gone through anything real with him." I shook my head, disgusted. "And what the hell was with the painting?" My voice was sharp, cutting. "You never would have let me take so much as a risque photo of you, but for him? You strip down, spread your legs, and pose naked so some random painter can capture you in all your glory?" I scoffed. "And then Mr. Wonderful hangs it up for the whole damn world to see? That's rich, Lisa. Real rich." Lisa flushed again, staring down at her shoes. I watched her closely. Eventually, she lifted her head. "It was?" She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. "It was exciting, David," she said, "being naked in front of another man, right after having fun with James. Knowing that he was recording our lovemaking for everyone to see." My lip curled in disgust. "Jesus Christ. Did you fund the painter too?" I blurted. Lisa had the decency to look embarrassed. "Well, once," she admitted. "After my last posing session. James and I figured we owed him one after teasing him all week." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Of course. Fair is fair. Huh?" Silence hung between them for a long moment. Then I asked, "Did you ever stop to think about the boys?" Lisa blinked. "The boys? What do they have to do with this?" My jaw tightened. "Are you serious?" "This has nothing to do with them," Lisa insisted. "They're grown, out of the house, living their own lives. You don't think shattering our family has any impact on them?" "You're not breaking up our family, David," she said with a roll of her eyes. "You don't want this getting out. You don't want more people knowing you're a—" She stopped herself, then sighed. "Besides, I know you love me. Just give me this for a little while, and when it's over, we can go back to the way things were. Just like always." I stared at her like she had grown a second head. I shook my head slowly. "I overestimated you. All these years, I really thought you were smart. Lisa frowned, clearly offended. I sighed. Lisa, a no-fault divorce doesn't mean there's no one at fault. It just means the state doesn't bother trying to assign blame. But the people? Oh, they'll know. And I'm not afraid to tell the world exactly what you are. Her face paled. What do you think the boys are going to say when they find out? I continued, she stammered, tripping over her own words before finally choking out, You wouldn't. My expression hardened. You'd ruin my relationship with him just to get back at me, she hissed. You scumbag. My voice was cold. Not to get back at you. To tell the truth. Funny how much it hurts, huh? For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Lisa actually looked defeated. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Can't we talk about this? I let out a breath. I'm afraid not, Lisa. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. I stepped toward the door, then paused. Besides, I added, glancing back at her, what the hell made you think I'd ever put up with you have fun with another man? The next morning, I called my sons. The first call was to Rob, the eldest. Dad, are you sure? Rob asked, his voice filled with disbelief. That doesn't sound anything like Mom. She and her lover boy even had a painting done, I said grimly. It's hanging above his damn bar. The two of them, plus half the damn firm, thought it was hilarious. That's ridiculous, Rob snapped. Mike, my younger son, listened to the whole story before finally speaking. Wow, Dad, he said, his voice laced with disbelief. What the hell did you do to piss Mom off that bad? I sat there, stunned, the phone pressed to my ear. I have no words. For the first time since this entire nightmare started, I didn't even know how to respond. I just don't want you to ever see that painting, I muttered, my voice void of emotion. Lisa's face flushed deep red. From the way her lips parted slightly, the way her eyes darted away, I knew. She had never once considered what their sons would think. It took everything in me not to lash out. She would never know just how close she came to ending up in the hospital that night. If it weren't for my late father's teachings about self-control, she might have. After a long moment, I unclenched my fists. Lisa's eyes flicked to my hands, widening slightly. That chill of realization washed over her. Maybe for the first time, she understood just how far she had pushed him. I sighed. Lisa, a no-fault divorce doesn't mean there's no one at fault. It just means the state doesn't waste time assigning blame. But the people? They'll know. And I'm not afraid to tell the world exactly what you are. For the first time, Lisa looked defeated. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Can't we talk about this? A week later, Lisa was served. She tried to fight it. Tried to convince the judge to order marital counseling. At first, it seemed like he was leaning in her favor. Then I spoke up. Your Honor, I said calmly, could you ask my wife to explain the nude painting of her hanging in James Fielding's house? The judge's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? I nodded. Naked, and well satisfied, from the looks of things. In another man's house? Lisa started to speak, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering urgently, Don't say a damn word. Better to stay quiet than to let the judge know just how smug and stupid you were. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Everything was split 50-50ths. The house was sold. Lisa moved in with her lover. I moved into a small apartment near my office. A little over a year later, James Fielding poured himself a single malt at his bar, my gaze drifting to the painting of Lisa. He smirked, remembering how fun it had been to have her pose after hours of mind-blowing fun. How he and Lisa had laughed, planning the perfect way to rub my nose in their affair. They had been so sure I would buckle under the humiliation that I've accepted their arrangement. Or, worst case, Lisa would take half my assets, and James would still get to enjoy her. But now, things had changed. Lately, Lisa had been clingy. She wanted more. Fielding had always been clear. Marriage wasn't on the table. And now, the thrill was gone. 6 months later, Lisa moved into her own apartment after she and James ended things. 1 week after that, she was reassigned to a new attorney at work, a younger one. And it only took 2 weeks before Lisa was back in another man's bed. I took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes locked on the painting. My ex-wife, and that smug bastard had thought my reaction was hysterical. I tore my eyes away from the painting, exhaling slowly. I don't know how the hell that painting got here, Rob muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. You've got to get them to take that down, Dad, Mike said, his voice thick with urgency. That's Mom. I arched a brow at his younger son. Oh, now it bothers you? I folded my arms. Funny. You didn't seem too concerned about what she was doing when I told you years ago. If I recall, you were more interested in figuring out what I'd done to make her mad at me. Mike's face turned red as several of the guys in the group shot him unimpressed looks. Please, Dad, Rob said, voice low. Just do something. I sighed, setting down my drink. I walked over to the bar, asking to speak with the manager. From a distance, my sons and their friends could see the animated conversation. Gesturing, a few raised voices, then a sharp shake of the manager's head. I returned to the group, my expression unreadable. The owner bought the painting from a private seller, he said simply. It's been a popular addition to the club. If I want it taken down, I can buy it. How much? Mike asked quickly. 10 grand, I said. Rob and Mike both recoiled. Dad, you have to. I told him I have no inclination to drop 10 grand on an erotic painting of my cheating ex-wife. I interrupted, my tone cold. My sons looked sick. The night was effectively over. The moment they got back to California, both boys headed straight for their mother's apartment. I, on the other hand, went back to my apartment and slept like a baby. The next afternoon, Lisa took her seat in the groom's parents' row just before the wedding started. She looked rough. Her eyes were red, her face pale. Guess explaining an explicit nude painting of yourself hanging in a damn strip club to your sons was harder than you expected, I thought dryly. I glanced at her as she sat a few feet away in the church pew. Last night wasn't too awkward, I muttered sarcastically. Lisa gave a stiff, humorless smile. Did you know Scum Sucker sold that painting? Not until last night, I said casually. Her blush deepened. Since their divorce 5 years ago, we had spent very little time in each other's presence. And, despite everything, I had to admit, aside from her bloodshot eyes, Lisa still looked good. But it didn't matter anymore. At the reception, Lisa was a very popular dance partner, especially among Rob's friends. And she knew exactly why. After last night, everyone had seen the painting. Everyone knew. She had expected it, but still, it was uncomfortable when several of the 20-somethings tried to pull her in a little too close or let their hands wander. She eventually returned to the table, dropping into her seat next to me. There was a time when you would have put a stop to that real fast, she said, her voice quieter than usual. I took a slow sip of my drink, not even looking at her. There was a time when you were my wife and my concern, I replied calmly. Then you became somebody else's concern. And now? I shrugged. I guess that concern is yours alone. Her lips pressed into a thin line. But from what I hear, I added, his voice a touch amused, you like them young. Just try to be somewhat discreet, for the boys' sake. Lisa stiffened. She knew the rumors. She knew that most of her lovers since the divorce had been significantly closer to her sons' ages than her own. What she didn't know was how I knew that, too. She glanced at me out of the corner of her eye. For the first time in 5 years, she really looked at me. The past half-decade had been kind to me. A few new lines on my face, my hair now streaked with gray, but my blue eyes were just as piercing, my jaw just as sharp. And she had thrown me away. For what? A little more fun? A little more aggressive? God, what an idiot I was. You really blew it, sis, came a voice at her ear. Lisa flinched, snapping out of her thoughts. Tell me I didn't just say that out loud, she whispered to Anna, her sister. Anna giggled. No, but the way you've been looking at David? Not subtle. She smirked. You might as well just ask him to screw you right here at the table. Lisa scowled. Actually, not screw me, silly. Just, she exhaled. Just make love to me, like we used to, and then cuddle afterward. Anna's smirk softened. Nobody's done that since you split, huh? Lisa shook her head, swallowing hard. Maybe if you asked him nicely. Anna mused. After all, it's David, the nicest guy in the world. And if he still loves you half as much as he used to, but Lisa never heard the rest. Because she knew. I had loved her. Deeply. And if I was anyone else, maybe she'd have a shot at winning me back. But I was smart. And I would never trust her again. I hadn't even attempted to date for the first year after the divorce. Women had noticed me, though. My workplace alone had several who made their interest clear when they learned I was single. Over time, I realized that single women in my age range significantly outnumbered single men. Finding dates wasn't a problem. Trust was. But tonight, as I sat at the reception, watching Lisa dance and get groped by Rob's friends, I felt nothing. No anger. No jealousy. No pain. And that was when she approached. Kristen, the bride's sister, sauntered toward me. I glanced up, greeted by the sight of a stunning blonde, about 5'2", with long legs and a dark blue dress that ended mid-thigh. "Want to dance?" she asked, flashing a playful smile. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark. I returned her smile. "Sure," I said, standing and taking her hand. Across the room, Lisa watched. Her stomach twisted, and for the first time since the divorce, she felt the sting of loss. Kristen's dress hugged her curves perfectly, tailored in a way that left little to the imagination while still remaining classy. As my eyes casually drifted to her left hand, I noticed something else: no rings. I smiled and stood up. Thanks to Lisa's love of dancing, I had taken lessons early in our marriage, and I have gotten good. It had been years, but as soon as I stepped onto the dance floor with Kristen, it all came back to me. We made a striking pair, moving seamlessly in sync, drawing a few admiring glances from the crowd. During the slow songs, Kristen nestled in close, resting her head against his shoulder. I didn't spend much time at the groom's family table after that. If we weren't dancing, I and Kristen were seated together at the bride's family table, our attention fixed solely on each other. I learned that Kristen was 52, a high school teacher about an hour outside of California, and had been divorced for over 2 decades. 20 years? I asked, raising an eyebrow. How does a beautiful woman like you stay on the market that long? Kristen smirked, sipping her wine. Major trust issues, for one. And for another? She set her glass down. I don't just jump into bed with any man. I grinned. Good answer. She winked. I thought so. That night, I and Kristen began working on their trust issues together. By the time they woke up the next morning, the foundation had been set. 1 year later, there was another wedding. This time, it was mine.